The transport ship's cargo bay fell silent as the massive doors groaned open, revealing a harsh landscape of ice and snow stretching endlessly toward gray mountains. Commander Sarah Chen felt the bitter wind slash across her face like frozen knives, but she stood firm while the alien representatives shifted uncomfortably beside her. "This is Kepler 442c, announced Zixatal, the Vorthan diplomatic liaison whose purple skin had already begun turning a darker shade in the cold. "Your species has requested membership in the Galactic Confederation, but first you must prove your worth through the survival trial." Sarah glanced at the other human candidates beside her. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, a survival expert from Alaska. Dr. Emily Harrison, a climatologist who had spent years in Antarctica. Sergeant Jake Thompson, a former Special Forces operative. And herself, a career military officer who had led missions in some of Earth's harshest environments. The Confederation had been very specific about the trial's requirements, allowing each species to send their 4 best candidates. Across the landing zone stood the other participants. The Zephyrians looked like tall, elegant birds with feathered crests that were already drooping in the cold. Their homeworld was tropical, with temperatures that rarely dropped below comfortable levels. The Krillian delegation appeared more promising, their thick gray hide and stocky build suggesting they might handle cold better. But even they were huddling together for warmth. "The rules are simple," Zixtal continued, his breath creating small clouds in the frigid air. "You have 72 standard hours to establish a sustainable shelter and prove your species can survive in hostile conditions. You may use only what you can find on this planet. No technology beyond basic tools. Those who fail to maintain core body temperature or show signs of severe distress will be disqualified." Dr. Harrison pulled out a small device and frowned at the readings. -42 degrees Celsius, and dropping, she whispered to Sarah. "Wind speed at 30 kilometers per hour. This is getting worse. Fast." The Vorthan official gestured toward a collection of basic supplies scattered across the ice. "You may select 1 tool per team member. Choose wisely." With that, the alien supervisors retreated to their heated observation pods, leaving the participants to face the elements alone. Sarah watched the other teams rush toward the tools, grabbing items frantically. The Zephyrians took cutting implements, their delicate hands shaking as they tried to grip the handles. The Krillians selected heavy hammers and digging tools, their strategy clearly focused on brute force excavation. "Hold on," Sarah called to her team. "Let's think about this." Marcus nodded, his experienced eyes scanning the landscape. "Look at what we're working with. Ice, snow, some exposed rock formations about half a kilometer north. Those other teams are panicking." Emily pointed toward a cluster of twisted metal debris partially buried in snow. Jake flexed his hands to keep circulation flowing. "The Zephyrians are already struggling. Look at them, trying to chip ice with those blades. Their movements are getting sluggish." Sarah made her decision. "We take rope, a small axe, a digging tool, and that metal detector. The others are thinking shelter first, but we need to understand our resources." They approached the supply area calmly, while chaos erupted around them. One of the Zephyrians had dropped his tool, his feathered hands too numb to maintain grip. The Krillians were already arguing amongst themselves in their guttural language, pointing in different directions. "Humans," Zixtal observed to his colleague through their communication device. "They appear remarkably calm for a species facing elimination." Sarah's team spent the first 30 minutes conducting a systematic survey of their environment. While other teams frantically began hacking at ice or trying to pile snow into walls, the humans mapped out wind patterns, identified the most sheltered areas, and located resource deposits. "There," Emily said, pointing to a depression in the landscape about 200 meters away. "Natural windbreak. And, if I'm reading these formations correctly, there's probably firewood buried under that snowdrift." Marcus was examining animal tracks in the snow. "Something's been through here recently. Small creatures. Probably seeking shelter too. That means there are spaces carved out already." As the first hour passed, The temperature continued dropping. The Zephyrians had managed to create a small circular wall of ice blocks, but they were clearly suffering. Their elegant movements had become stiff and awkward. One of them was sitting down frequently, a dangerous sign in extreme cold. The Krillians were making better progress, using their natural strength to pile large chunks of ice into a crude fortress. But their shelter had no roof, and the wind was still cutting through gaps between their hastily placed blocks. Sarah's team had barely begun construction, instead focusing on gathering materials. They had located the buried debris Emily had spotted, uncovering twisted metal sheets that could serve as reflective surfaces. Jake had found several long, straight pieces of wood, probably remnants from some previous settlement. "Time to work," Sarah announced. "Marcus, start on the base. Emily, help me with the frame design. Jake, keep gathering insulation materials." They began constructing something that looked nothing like the other team's efforts. Instead of a traditional ice shelter, they were building a sophisticated lean-to structure using the salvaged metal as a windbreak and heat reflector. The wooden poles formed a sturdy frame angled to deflect wind while capturing maximum sunlight. "Ingenious," Dr. Harrison murmured, as she packed snow mixed with torn fabric from their clothing into gaps. "We're creating multiple layers of insulation. The metal reflects our body heat back, the wood frame distributes weight evenly, and the snow fabric mixture will freeze into an excellent insulator." By the second hour, the differences between teams became stark. Two of the Zephyrians were showing clear signs of hypothermia, their coordination failing as they tried to complete their ice circle. The Krillians had managed to build walls but were struggling with exhaustion from their brute force approach. The humans continued working steadily, their movements efficient and purposeful. They had learned to work in rotations, with one person always moving vigorously to maintain circulation, while others focused on precision tasks. "Body heat conservation," Jake explained to Emily as they worked. "Never let yourself get completely still and cold like this. Always keep blood flowing." Sarah was weaving together dried grass and small twigs they had found, creating insulation material that could be stuffed into clothing and shelter gaps. "My grandmother taught me this technique for winter camping," she said. "Natural materials often outperform manufactured ones when used correctly." As the third hour approached, the alien observers began taking more detailed notes. The Vorthan delegation was clearly surprised by what they were witnessing. "The Zephyrians are failing as expected," Zixtal noted. "Their physiology is completely unsuited for this environment. The Krillians show promise, but their approach is inefficient. They will exhaust their energy reserves." His assistant pointed toward the human construction site. "What are the humans doing exactly? Their shelter appears smaller than the others." Zixtal activated a thermal scanner and stared at the results in confusion. "Impossible. Their structure is maintaining internal temperature, 15 degrees higher than ambient conditions. How are they achieving this without external heat sources?" The humans had completed their basic shelter and were now working on what appeared to be a secondary project. They had created a small fire pit using rocks and metal, positioned to channel heat into their shelter while venting smoke safely away. Marcus was demonstrating fire-starting techniques using friction and tinder made from dried plant material they had gathered. "Bow drill method. Possiphos," he explained to the others. "Works even in wet conditions, if you prepare your materials properly." Soon, thin smoke began rising from their camp, and the thermal readings in their shelter climbed even higher. The humans had not only created effective protection from the elements, but had established a reliable heat source, using only natural materials. Meanwhile, the Zephyrians were in serious trouble. 3 of the 4 team members were now sitting constantly, their responses sluggish. The 4th was trying desperately to complete their shelter alone, but his movements were becoming increasingly unsteady. The Krillians had realized their mistake and were attempting to add a roof to their structure, but their earlier energy expenditure had left them weakened. They were moving slowly, and their breath was coming in heavy clouds that spoke of overexertion in the extreme cold. Sarah looked up from adjusting their fire's airflow and way. The second day dawned with even harsher conditions. Snow fell heavily during the night, and fierce winds had knocked down parts of the other team's shelters. Sarah woke to the sound of Marcus adding fuel to their carefully maintained fire. The warm glow casting dancing shadows on their insulated walls. Temperature dropped to -48 overnight, Emily reported, checking her instruments. But we maintained -8 inside. The thermal mass we built into the walls worked perfectly. Quote, Sarah crawled out of their shelter and immediately noticed the dramatic changes across the trial area. The Zephyrian shelter had partially collapsed, and only 2 of their team members were visible, huddled together inside their remaining ice walls. They weren't moving much, which was an ominous sign. The Krillians had fared better structurally, but their team members were clearly suffering. Their thick hides, which had seemed advantageous initially, were now working against them. Unlike human skin, which could redirect blood flow to vital organs, their physiology couldn't adapt to extreme temperature changes. Look at that, Jake pointed toward the Krillian camp. They built for defense instead of efficiency. Massive walls, but no heat retention. All their energy went into construction instead of survival. Dr. Harrison emerged from their shelter, looking remarkably fresh considering the circumstances. That's the key difference. We planned for sustainability. They planned for security. Different survival philosophies entirely. Sarah watched the alien observation pods through the swirling snow. The supervisors had been taking extensive readings throughout the night, and she could see increased activity inside their heated chambers. They were clearly surprised by something. The humans had spent part of the night working on improvements to their shelter system. They had created a secondary heat chamber using salvaged metal and stones, which captured and redistributed heat from their main fire. The design was elegant in its simplicity, using principles of thermodynamics that the other species seemed not to understand. We need to check on the others, Sarah decided. This isn't just about proving humanity's worth anymore. Those Zephyrians might be in real trouble. Marcus nodded grimly. Hypothermia can kill fast when it reaches the final stages. Their species clearly didn't evolve for this. As they approached the Zephyrian camp, the severity of the situation became clear. 3 team members were unconscious or nearly so, their beautiful feathers now dull and frost-covered. The 4th, their apparent leader, was still trying to tend to his companions, but his movements were erratic and confused. Classic late-stage hypothermia symptoms, Emily whispered. Confusion, loss of coordination, eventual loss of consciousness. Sarah made a decision that would have significant implications for how the aliens viewed humanity. Jake, bring the emergency thermal blankets from our supplies. Marcus, get that portable heat source we rigged up. We're going to help them. Sarah, Emily warned quietly. The trial rules said, we can't use advanced technology if we help them with our equipment. The rules said we couldn't use technology for our own survival. Sarah corrected. They didn't say anything about humanitarian aid. The human team moved quickly, bringing their improvised heating device and additional insulation materials to the Zephyrian camp. The bird-like aliens were barely conscious, but their leader managed to focus on Sarah's face as she approached. Why? He whispered in heavily accented standard. You compete against us. Sarah knelt beside him, adjusting the thermal reflector to direct heat toward the unconscious aliens. Because leaving you to die isn't competition. It's murder. Humans don't win by watching others lose everything. The Krillians had noticed the activity and sent one of their members to investigate. When he saw what the humans were doing, he returned quickly to his team. Soon, all 4 Krillians approached the Zephyrian camp, carrying what supplies they could spare. Honorable action, the Krillian leader rumbled in his deep voice. Perhaps survival trial tests more than just endurance. Working together, the 3 species managed to stabilize the Zephyrians. The humans shared their fire-starting techniques, showing the Krillians how to create more efficient heat sources. In return, the Krillians used their strength to help reinforce shelters for everyone. The Zephyrian leader, now warmer and more alert, approached Sarah. I am Sektar of the Eastern Winds. You have saved my team's lives. This debt cannot be easily repaid. No debt, Sarah replied simply. Just beings, helping beings. The alien supervisors had observed this entire interaction with growing amazement. In their heated observation pod, Zeekstal was reviewing footage and sensor data with increasing incredulity. Commander, his assistant said, I'm reading something extraordinary. When the humans began helping the other teams, their own shelter's efficiency actually improved. How is that possible? Zeekstal studied the thermal imaging. They're sharing knowledge and resources, but somehow their own position has become stronger. Look at these readings. Their camp now shows 3 separate heat sources, multiple backup systems, and increased insulation. By helping others, they've created a more robust survival network. Should we intervene? The trial is meant to test individual species' capabilities. No, Zeekstal said slowly. I think we're witnessing exactly what we need to see. Back at the camps, the cooperation between species had created an entirely new dynamic. The humans had taught efficient fire management and heat conservation. The Krillians contributed their knowledge of ice construction and structural engineering. Even the Zephyrians, despite their physical limitations, offered insights into wind patterns and weather prediction that proved valuable. Sarah found herself working alongside Sektar to improve the overall camp layout. Your people read weather signs differently than we do. Weather signs, she observed. Those feather movements aren't just random, are they? Sektar's head tilted in what might have been amusement. Each feather responds to air pressure changes. We sense storms hours before they arrive. But this knowledge means nothing if we cannot survive to use it. That's where cooperation comes in, Marcus said, joining the conversation. Your weather sense? Our fire management? Krillian construction skills. Together, we're all stronger. Dr. Harrison had been documenting everything, and her scientific mind was fascinated by what was developing. This is unprecedented. 3 species with completely different evolutionary backgrounds finding ways to complement each other's abilities. The second day continued with this new cooperative approach. Instead of 3 separate camps struggling individually, they had created what was essentially one large, multi-species survival community. Each group maintained their own primary shelter, but they shared resources, knowledge, and labor freely. When evening approached, they gathered around the central fire the humans had helped establish. The temperature was dropping again, but no one seemed concerned anymore. They had backup heating systems, multiple shelter options, and most importantly, they were working as a team. Tell me about your homeworld, Jake asked the Krillians, as they shared a meal of preserved rations. Korvac Prime, the leader replied. Heavy gravity, volcanic activity. We build to last, because everything tries to tear structures down. But we never learned to build for cold like this. Sektar spread his wings slightly. A gesture the humans had learned indicated comfort. Zephyria has endless skies and warm winds. We are creatures of air and warmth. This trial seemed impossible for us until you showed that survival is not just about individual strength. Sarah stared up at the alien stars through the clearing snow. On Earth, we learned early that the environment doesn't care about individual strength. Humans survived because we worked together, shared knowledge, adapted to change. Maybe that's what this trial is really testing. As the night progressed, the mixed camp became a place of cultural exchange as much as survival. The humans shared stories of Earth's diverse environments and how different human cultures had adapted to them. The Krillians spoke of their species' great construction projects and engineering marvels. The Zephyrians described their aerial cities and advanced understanding of atmospheric sciences. Your species, Sektar said to Sarah as the fire burned low. You call this cooperation natural, but it is remarkable. Most species in the galaxy compete until 1D, the final day of the trial, arrived with crystal clear skies and the harshest cold yet. Temperatures had plummeted to -55 degrees Celsius, pushing the limits of what any species could endure. But the mixed camp that had evolved over the previous days faced this challenge with confidence born of cooperation and shared ingenuity. Sarah emerged from the human shelter to find the entire camp already bustling with activity. The Krillians were adding reinforcement to structures based on stress patterns they had learned to recognize. The Zephyrians, despite their physical limitations in the cold, were serving as weather scouts, their sensitive feathers detecting minute changes in atmospheric pressure. The humans moved between groups, troubleshooting problems and optimizing systems. Final day phenomenon, Dr. Harrison observed, checking her instruments. Despite the temperature being the lowest yet, our camp efficiency is at its highest. We're maintaining internal temperatures of -5 degrees across all shelters. Marcus was working with 2 Krillians to perfect a heat circulation system they had developed together. It's like the old saying about the sum being greater than the parts. Alone, each of our species had critical weaknesses for this environment. Together, we cover each other's blind spots. The alien supervisors in their observation pods were conducting furious discussions. Through their monitoring equipment, they had observed not just survival, but the birth of something unprecedented in Galactic Confederation history. Sir, Zixtal's assistant reported, the human ship is requesting communication. Their captain wants to speak with you directly. Captain Williams appeared on the communication screen, his weathered face serious. Supervisor Zixtal, I've been monitoring the situation down there. I need to know the status of all participants, not just my people. This request puzzled the Vorthan. The trial is for your species' admission to the Confederation. Why concern yourself with others? Because that's how humans think, Williams replied bluntly. If our people are down there helping others survive, then the success of those others becomes our concern too. We don't abandon allies. Well, Zixtal found himself reconsidering everything he thought he knew about species evaluation. All participants are not only surviving but thriving, Captain. Your people have created something extraordinary. Back on the planet's surface, the 3rd day had become a celebration of interspecies cooperation. The camp now featured multiple innovations that no single species could have developed alone. The humans' understanding of fire and heat management, combined with Krillian structural engineering and Zephyrian atmospheric science, had created a survival system more advanced than anything in the Confederation's databases. Sektar approached Sarah as she worked on improving their shared fire system. Commander Chen, I must ask you something that troubles me. Your people knew from the beginning that you could help us survive, didn't you? Sarah paused in her work, considering the question carefully. We knew we had techniques that might help. Yes, but we also knew that real survival meant building something sustainable for everyone. But the trial was designed to test individual species' capabilities. By helping us, you risked your own evaluation. Sarah smiled, an expression that Sektar was beginning to recognize as uniquely human. Sektar, if humanity can only succeed by watching others fail, then we don't deserve to succeed at all. Our species learned long ago that the strongest communities are built by lifting everyone up, not by standing on others. The Krillian leader, Groktar, overheard this exchange and joined the conversation. This philosophy explains much about your people's survival. On Korvac Prime, we compete for resources. Strongest takes most. But here, sharing resources made everyone stronger. Dr. Harrison looked up from her data collection. That's the fundamental difference in survival strategies. Competition versus cooperation. Both have their place, but extreme environments favor cooperation every time. As the day progressed, the mixed camp faced their final challenge. A massive storm system approached from the north, bringing wind speeds that threatened to destroy everything they had built. The alien supervisors watched with concern as their instruments detected conditions that would challenge even their advanced technology. This is beyond the planned parameters, Zixtal's assistant warned. Should we evacuate the participants? Zixtal studied the approaching storm, then looked at the thermal readings from the surface camp. No. I think they're about to show us something important. The three species worked together with remarkable coordination as the storm approached. The Zephyrians' early warning systems gave them precious time to prepare. The Krillians used their strength to anchor structures against the coming winds. The humans coordinated the overall response, their experience with extreme weather proving invaluable. "Everyone into the central shelter," Sarah called out as the wind began to pick up. "We designed it to handle this." The central shelter was a marvel of interspecies engineering. Krillian structural principles provided stability against wind and weight. Human thermal dynamics maintained livable temperatures. Zephyrian aerodynamics reduced wind resistance. Together, they had created something that could withstand conditions that would destroy any single species' effort. As the storm raged outside, the mixed group found themselves warm, safe, and comfortable. They passed the time sharing more stories, comparing notes on their different technologies, and planning potential collaborations for the future. "You know," Jake said during a lull in the conversation, "when we started this trial, I thought it was about proving humans were tough enough for space. But I think it's really been about proving we're smart enough for cooperation." Groktar's rumbling laugh filled the shelter. "Humans are clever. But more than clever, you are wise. Strength without wisdom leads to destruction. Wisdom without strength leads to extinction. You combine both." Sektar ruffled his feathers thoughtfully. "The Confederation has thousands of member species, but most interactions are formal, diplomatic. What we have built here in 3 days. This is genuine understanding." Sarah nodded. "Maybe that's what the galaxy needs. Not just political alliances, but real partnerships based on mutual respect and shared goals." Outside, the storm continued for hours. But inside the shelter, the three species continued their cultural exchange. They discovered that despite their vastly different origins, they shared common values about community, exploration, and the pursuit of knowledge. When the storm finally passed and they emerged from the shelter, they found their camp had not only survived but had actually been improved by the additions they made to handle the storm. The settlement now looked permanent, like a small town, rather than a temporary survival site. The alien supervisors approached the camp as the official trial time concluded. Zeekstal looked around at what the three species had accomplished with obvious amazement. "The trial period has ended," he announced formally. "All participants have not only survived, but exceeded all expectations." Sarah stepped forward to speak for the group. "Supervisor Zeekstal, we need to clarify something. This wasn't 3 separate trials. This was one shared trial. If humanity gains admission to the Confederation, we want it understood that we come as partners with the Zephyrians and Krillians, not as competitors." This statement created immediate discussion among the alien observers. Such a request was unprecedented in Confederation history. Sektar spread his wings in what the humans had learned was a gesture of agreement. "We have learned more about survival and cooperation in 3 days than in centuries of isolation." Groktar's deep voice rumbled approval. "Krillians agree. Humans have shown us that strength comes from unity, not dominance." Zeekstal looked at his instruments one final time, then at the remarkable settlement the three species had created together. "I must communicate with the Confederation Council immediately. What you have accomplished here, it may change how we understand survival itself." As the rescue ships arrived to collect the participants, Sarah looked back at their temporary home. In 3 days, they had built something that represented more than shelter from the cold. They had built a foundation for interspecies cooperation that could reshape the galaxy. "Commander," Dr. Harrison said quietly, "I think we just passed a test we didn't even know we were taking." Sarah smiled as she watched Zephyrians, Krillians, and humans working together to dismantle their camp, carefully preserving innovations that all three species wanted to study further. Maybe the real test was never about surviving the cold. Maybe it was about proving we could build something warmer than any fire. The humans had come to prove they deserved a place among the stars. Instead, they had proven that the stars themselves would be brighter when species learned to shine together. As their ship lifted off from the frozen planet, Sarah knew they weren't just returning home as successful candidates for the Confederation. They were returning as the architects of a new kind of galactic community, one built on the simple human principle that everyone deserves a chance to be warm. Emanates. You compete by lifting others up. Maybe that's why we're still here, Emily mused. Earth threw everything at us. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, floods, droughts. We couldn't survive any of it alone, so we learned not to be alone. The alien observers continued their monitoring throughout the night, but their focus had shifted dramatically. They were no longer measuring individual species' performance, but rather documenting something entirely unexpected: the emergence of an interspecies survival protocol based on shared knowledge and mutual aid. By the morning of the third day, it was clear that the trial had become something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. Chad, the other team's struggle. She felt no satisfaction in their competitors' difficulties, only a quiet determination to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. How are we doing on insulation? She called to Emily, who was stuffing their shelter walls with the grass and fabric mixture. Better than expected. Internal temperature is holding at -12 degrees. That's survivable indefinitely as long as we maintain the fire and our activity levels. The first day's trial was nearly complete, and the differences between species had become unmistakable. While the aliens struggled against the environment, the humans had adapted to it, working with natural forces instead of fighting against them.